When companies are deciding how to come to market, there's a lot of questions they should ask. First of all, the strategy of the company. Is the plan to be a standalone company that becomes a large corporation like a Medtronic or a Pfizer? Or is it to invent something that hopefully a Medtronic or a Pfizer would like to acquire? That decision will impact the company in a lot of ways, especially depending on the intended use that's selected for a product. If you want a very specific intended use, for example, to treat a disease and there's no product out there like your product already, and let's say it's a medical device, you're going to have to go the PMA route, which is pre-market approval. However, if there were devices already out there and your product was, say, a tool and not a therapy, some new therapy that's not been already established in the market, you could probably take the 510K path, assuming you can find a predicate, and that would require less funding. And those decisions, again, based on whether you want your company to be its own standalone or acquired, I think would be impacted by the path that you choose and what your intended use is for your product. Other questions companies should consider, they seem very basic and obvious, but what kind of product do you have? Is it a drug? Is it a device? Is it a biologic? Is it a human cell or tissue product? Could it be a dietary supplement, a food, a cosmetic? Depending on the classification of your product, FDA will look at you differently and ask different things of you, demand different things, I should say. For example, with drugs and devices, biologics, they all require approval prior to entering the market. That is, unless you're a generic. For example, on the drug side, if there's an OTC monograph for your product, you can start manufacturing as long as you register and list and follow all of the general controls put in place by the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Of course, there's a litany of other requirements, but the hurdles are much lower. Same with a device. If you have a tongue depressor, something very innocuous, and versus an implant, for example, a pacemaker, the differences in regulatory requirements are vast. Other considerations for the product, really what is the intended use of your product? And that's going to drive a lot of decisions. For example, how you'll have to clinically study your product, and of course, which regulatory path you'll take. And that brings up another important question. Will your device or your drug, how will you have to study it? What will the demands by the FDA, the agency, what demands will they place on you? And then once you're on the market, there's a litany of other regulations that you have to deal with and consider for these therapeutic products like drugs and devices, for example. Like the anti-kickback statute, your relationships with physicians, are they meeting compliance muster? What about your relationships with doctors? Are you reporting those under the Sunshine Act, the Physician Payment Sunshine Act? What HIPAA requirements may you have to deal with when you're promoting products? If you're using social media, what regulations are in place that impact your promotional behavior? There's just a litany of things to consider, and those are just a few questions that you can consider when you're going on the market.